There is a moment in every life when you decide to rise, to stand taller than your fear, to speak louder than your doubt, to chase the vision that sets your soul on fire. This is that moment. And here, we walk it together with stories that awaken, voices that inspire, and truths that set you free. This is Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald, where hope has a voice, and that voice is yours. And welcome to the show, everybody. We've got a great, timely show for you to watch and to listen to today. And Brachelle, how are you, first of all?
I'm good, Kevin. It's been a miraculous week. Crazy things are happening. Changes are en route, and it's all good things. We've learned so much, and I would love for you to introduce our guest because he talks about maybe some of the ways that we can interact with each other in our differences in a positive way.
Well, he is an author. He is also a father, and his son was scheduled to maybe be here as well, but he is following like my heart because he's watching a football game, which is more important because we have to have our priorities in life. And watching two teams that you have been following for a long time, and they're playing each other, I don't know how that's going to turn out. I hope it turns out well. Maybe it'll be a tie. What do you think? And Blake Baumann is our guest.
Hey, I'm glad to be here, Brachelle and Kevin. It is a tremendous honor. And yes, I'm pulling for either extra overtime or a tie.
well, because for somebody it's not going to end up good, but
Correct.
it's a couple of Texas schools and in football world in Texas, it's like more people go watch football games than they go to church.
Yeah.
That is true. That is true. They schedule church around football.
Yeah, there you go. I do the same thing.
There are actually in Texas football stadiums for high school that are comparable to a lot of college stadiums. They have lots of folks and stuff. But in any event, I hope he has a good time. But Blake, we're talking to you about autism and some of its effects, and you've written a book about it. And the book has been out about a month now, and it's doing really quite well, and it's very instructive for folks. The name of the book is Autism Launch Plan. It's a parent's guide to helping children successfully launch into life. That is a big deal, and it concerns everyone that has an autistic child. Now there are lots and lots of different levels or whatever that is, and so we're going to concentrate on level 1, which are high functioning autistic children that you have a lot of personal experience with.
I do. I'm autistic myself, and I was diagnosed when I actually found out when my eldest son, he was 15 at the time, and I have a blended family, and my wife was a gifted education teacher, and she said, "Hey, I think your eldest is on the spectrum," and I said, "No way." And so, sure enough, she prodded me, and finally, after resisting for a long time, I took him in. Sure enough, he was diagnosed. At the time, it was called Asperger's. Now, they don't call that anymore, but that's when I got diagnosed as well. And it was interesting because what I thought autism was radically different when I started studying it and jumping in to really see what it was. Because I honestly, even after the diagnosis, I denied it. Because I don't know. Have y'all seen the movie Rain Man? I know this is dating us a little bit, but Dustin Hoffman.
I'm an excellent driver.
There you go. Right. And that's what I had another family member with autism that was nonverbal. And that's what I really thought autism was specifically. And when I started digging in and learning that it was a whole spectrum, that's when it shifted everything for me. But I started looking at the stats. And Brachelle and Kevin, I don't know if you've ever seen the stats, but they're pretty scary. is Congress had put out a report, just ironically, at the time my son got diagnosed, and I read it, and part of the stats were 9 times more likely to get hooked on some kind of substance abuse, whether it's drugs or alcohol, 7 times more likely to commit suicide. At the time, only 15%, so 15% was working a job, and those were typically underpaid and underemployed. And I just didn't want that to be my son, and I didn't want him to be one of the stats. So that led me on to this mission, and that's where the book really ended up coming from, is real life experience.
Blake, when they said, "Oh, by the way, Blake, you're on the spectrum," it's like, what? I'm an adult. I'm leading a successful. What the hell do you mean I'm on the spectrum? Was that your response?
It was. I said, you're wrong. And they said, no, all the tests show. And if you go back to my childhood, I'm going to share with you 2 stories, and you're going to say, yep, we could have told you now. So one of the stories was when I was about 5 years old. I was sitting in our living room, and I had some grape juice, and I spilt the grape juice. And my mom said, quick, Blake, go get a wet washcloth. And so I ran off to go get a wet washcloth. Well, 15, 20 minutes has gone by. So my mom cleaned it, and then she came looking for me. She found me in the dirty clothes hamper crying. And she goes, what is wrong? And I told her I couldn't find any wet washcloths. I didn't have the understanding to grab a washcloth and get it wet and bring it. I was actually digging through the dirty clothes, looking for a wet washcloth. And so my brain was wired so literally. And then I'm almost a little scared to admit this one, but I was in my 20s when this happened. I was visiting my parents, and my mom asked me, she goes, Blake, can you go put the clothes from the washer into the dryer? So I did. And then about an hour later, I hear my full name getting called, and I go, what did I do that when my mom would call my full name? So I walked in there and I said, yes, ma'am. And she says, my clothes are soaking wet. You never turned on the dryer. And my first reaction was, you never asked me to. And yeah, and so I've been trained much better than that now that I know, put the clothes in the dryer, turn it on, and so forth. But those were like dead giveaways, and sitting in the yard with the box on my head, trying to hear vibrations of the moon and building UFO detectors, probably a good giveaway. But at the time, I thought it was just typical things.
Yeah, it was just typical things. Maybe, Rochelle, am I on the spectrum?
I hate to break it to you, Kevin. We probably would be astonished if we both took that test, because it's like Blake, how you said you didn't accept it, right? They're giving you a new label. You're like, this is just the way I am. Like, we don't need to make a problem out of it. But when you started to learn, like for me specifically, I haven't been diagnosed, but I know well that I'm on the spectrum and would be if I got tested. And it's the little things that I've always just done or been, like sticky. I will admit this right now. In all of our shows and things I do when I'm focused since I was little, sticky. My fingers being sticky, having that sort of sensory with like feeling and stuff like that, or certain things, the way, like if they look, it will just drive me nuts. Sometimes even about other people, like the way they walk. I'm like, why are you walking like that? He's driving me nuts, like how does that work? But what are some of the things that you learned through this process that are maybe little things that the average person has in common with each other and is unaware that is a sign?
So sensory is one of the key things. So like both my girls, trying to put them in like pantyhose or having, because they were trying to put them in dance. And that was the worst fight. And we finally said, well, we're not going to force this. But again, this was all before any kind of diagnosis going on. We're going, what in the world is going on? One of my girls, their food would not touch each other. If their food touched, they wouldn't eat it. And it just, I'm going, okay, that's kind of interesting, but we'll honor their uniqueness. And then there's a story of when my son, we moved into this house, and he had lived with my ex-wife at the time, and he came to live with us, and he had all his clothes, and my wife said, go put them in your drawers. And we walked into the room, and he just stood there frozen. And my wife goes, "What's going on?" And so I walked in there and I looked around. I said, "Oh, there's too many choices."
Yep.
And so many times when the kids freeze, probably the neurotypical would call it paralysis analysis, but I would tell you it's overload mode is kind of how I coin it. Is there's just too many choices, there's too much overwhelm, and these are some of the hidden signs that people don't notice. The sensory stuff, the stemming. So like somebody clicking their pen back and forth a lot. I know that doesn't just happen with ADHD. If you see kids wearing hoodies when it's like, I'm from Texas and it's 100 degrees most of the time of the year, you see a kid in a hoodie around 100-degree weather, there's a good chance they're probably on the spectrum because it's a sensory safety area for them as well. So there's all these little signs that if you start getting hyper-focused to pay attention to, you'll start noticing the ahas of it. The ultra literalness is another one. And again, because there's a quote by, I think it was Dr. Stephen Shore, that says, just because you meet one person on the spectrum, you've only met one person on the spectrum. We're radically different. So it is hard to tell whether or not you're on the spectrum or not, depending where you're at. But, I look at the spectrum or autism as just kind of a characteristic of who we are. I don't really look at it as a disorder or a diagnosis. It's just a trait of how our brain is wired differently.
Now, when I was in elementary school, this goes back into the 60s, there was no such thing as, and it was more like, oh, your child has behavioral issues. And they had no way of dealing with it other than, oh, he's just got behavior issues and stuff. And when did we become enlightened enough for autism to actually become a thing that we could analyze about their behavior and what was causing it?
Well, I'm going to say, Kevin, I don't think we're there yet, to be honest with you.
I couldn't agree more.
If you saw what came out on the political realm, and I try to stay away from politics, but you saw what came around about Tylenol. I joked with my mom. I said, "Hey, why did you take Tylenol when you were pregnant with me?" She goes, "I don't even think Tylenol was a thing back then." I mean, and you think about all these historical figures that are pretty much thought to be on the spectrum: Einstein, Da Vinci, Michelangelo, and things of that nature. It's a genetic thing. And I was just reading an article that talked about how autism has always been around, and it's really, in a sense, it's how we got people to think differently to evolve the world. And with school, I don't know that school has caught up yet. I think teachers need a lot more training. I know from the stories I hear, because I have a family full of educators, if a kid's behavior is acting, they're going to try to send them to a sensory room, which is great. But then they're not trying to help enhance and educate and understand what is going on in that kid's world, because it could be the lights are making too loud of a sound. And they don't stop to get curious about what's going on. And I teach a little bit of a framework called the HEAR framework. And the HEAR framework, HEAR, just a simple acronym. H means hold judgment, just don't judge. E means explore with curiosity, and A is ask questions, and then R is reframe your approach. And I think if we would do that more often with the kids and really try to get curious about why they're doing things, and not just putting them in a room or in a metaphorical box and saying, hey, here's how we're going to treat it, it would make a massive difference. And so I still think education has a long way to go, Kevin.
We're not there yet. Well, as a matter of fact, when we come back from this break, there's another guest who's been on, who's a fabulous lady who is on the spectrum, and her son is also on the spectrum, and the struggles that she went through with the school system to get them to recognize that homeschooling was better for him because of all the sensory overload that was going on at school. And they review, oh no, he has to go to school, and we need him here. And she said, well, we'll talk about that when we come back. We'll be right back right after this brief message. Brachelle is here, and she's maybe on the spectrum, maybe not. I don't know. I think, everybody's on the
I'll
spectrum.
accept it, Kevin. Everything he just said, I've done, and I still do. So it's okay.
We'll be right back. Here's another point to ponder from Positive Talk Radio. What is the easiest thing to justify? It is a small transgression. The one no one will ever see, no one will ever know. The tiny exaggeration on the expense report. The extra minute you took on your lunch break. The packaging you tossed in the wrong recycle bin because it was closer. In those moments, the question isn't, will I get caught? The question is, will I know? It isn't about avoiding punishment. It's a silent agreement you make with yourself when you choose to do the right thing. To return the wallet. To fix the mistake. To respect the empty space. You aren't impressing the world. You're earning your own respect. That small choice, made entirely in private, is how you build a life you never have to look away from. The only audience that matters is you. And welcome back to Positive Talk. My name is Kevin, and Brachelle is right there. And we've got a great guest, Blake Baumann. And by the way, Blake, I want to introduce you to a gentleman that listens to the show on a regular basis, along with his 20 people who are going to be preparing breakfast for 370 kids in Kenya in the morning. Brachelle, go ahead.
Hi, Samuel again. He says, well done. Greetings once again, Brother Kevin, my sister from another mother, Brachelle, and guest brother, coach, speaker, Blake Baumann receives greetings from Kibera Restoring Hope Center, based in the slums of Nairobi, Kenya. We are watching this favorite program, Positive Talk Radio Show, as we prepare for today's feeding program, No Child Goes to Bed Hungry. God bless you, team. And God bless you, Samuel. I can't wait to join into the live and communicate with you. It gets better every single week, Blake. I swear.
No.
And another person just says, who's also there and has asked Brachelle a question.
Ooh, the Restoring Hope Center reaches out and says, greetings, Kevin, Brachelle, and guest coach Blake. We are listening and watching this live favorite program from the Restoring Hope Center. Thanks for inspirational teaching. Guest Brachelle, how many we are watching and listening on this program. And I have to tell you guys, if you were unaware, for anybody who listens to our show, that we're worldwide. We're in 190 countries, translated into over 30 languages, and on probably every platform you could imagine. So everybody's hearing you. We're sharing your story. We support and love you guys to the end of the earth and beyond. So don't you worry about that. We've got your back.
Well, but he asked you a question. How many people are listening, Brachelle?
Right now or in the future? That's a hard question to answer.
No, in Kenya, in the Hope Center.
In the Hope Center. I don't know how many people they have in the Hope Center, but I know that they're up to 30 people now in the Restoring Hope for Samuel feeding program. And then now they're also feeding the parents, but I'm not sure as to how many.
So we're not sure. I say 25, but we don't know. So you're going to need to count them and tell us how many are listening right now in the Hope Center in Kibera, Kenya.
Yep.
So
I'll look into that and I'll get back to you guys.
Perfect. But we're talking with Blake Baumann. He's written a great book, and it is going to become a go-to manual for how to help kids get launched from the spectrum. The Autism Launch Plan, a parent's guide to helping children successfully launch into life, which is, Blake, that's what it's all about, isn't it?
It is. I mean, if you think about what a parent's deepest fear is, and it was mine and it's other parents that I've talked to, it's what's going to happen to our kids when we're no longer here. And we want to try to give them the tools and the skills to be self-sufficient and independent so that we don't have to worry about their well-being when we're no longer here to be able to help them. And what I have found is, I mentioned when my son got diagnosed at 15, I didn't want him to be a stat. And so what I did is I actually created this 5-year plan. I was coming from the corporate world, but again, not knowing I was on the spectrum until I did know I was on the spectrum, I looked at things very uniquely. And basically I put this plan together specifically after my son told me he was never going to go to college, he was never going to work, he was never going to drive, and he was never going to move out. And so I thanked him for his opinions. And we put together a plan on the whiteboard, and it was a 5-year plan, and he accomplished it in 3.5 years. And he's been out on his own, living successfully, independently, and self-sufficiently. And when other parents started seeing what I was doing with him, they asked me if I could help their child. And I started doing it. And I saw that there was just this need. When kids turn 18, they lose a lot of support. They lose the school system support. They lose medical services and health support. And then if they don't go to college, they lose that structure. And that structure is so important for people with autism because it kind of guides us and it keeps us moving forward. And if you lose that, you start getting stuck. And so I started running across a ton of kids that were stuck. And when I started looking at it, they all had these similar issues of why they're stuck. And it was everything from fear to what I would say are their intrinsic motivators. And these are the reasons they do things, to self-identity issues, to pathological demand avoidance. So any kind of demands would trigger anxiety and fight, flight, or freeze, to things like burnout or just lack of structure at home. And once I saw this pattern, I said, well, this is everything that I've gone through myself personally. And I've helped with, I have 4 neurodivergent young adults that are all successfully out of the home and doing well. And I used it all with them as well. And I just said, okay, I think it's time to write a book to be able to try to help other parents who are in the same situation.
I can only tell you that my son is in that situation, and he was the youngest child. His wife is also the youngest child in their particular families. And so he has no earthly idea. It was going to be hard enough for him to raise a baby that did not have any special needs or any special issues. And so they're trying to learn as they go. But when you said that we're not there yet, we are not there yet. People don't even have any idea of how to work with the kids to get them to do better and to get them launched in a positive way, which every parent needs. Because I got to ask you, being a former parent myself, now I have smelly middle-aged men. What was it like for you when he said to you, well, I ain't moving out and I ain't getting a job and I ain't going to college and I'm living with you, Daddy, for the rest of your life and my life?
Well, I'm a lot more patient and calm these days. But at that time, the temperature just kind of rose and I go, did he just really say that to me out loud? Did he just really say that to me as he's playing video games, living his best life? And I'm just going, okay, that is the clue that I really do need to do something. And it was actually very eye-opening because it helped us with the 3 others that were younger than him to really launch him into the right direction and launch them. And what we started doing after that is we started actually building in independent skills into our younger kids. So for example, and this is for any listeners, I would start this immediately, is one of our daughters wanted the brand new iPhone. And I said, okay, tell you what, put together a presentation on why you deserve it. And it can be PowerPoint, it can be coloring, it can be whatever. And she was about 9 at the time. And they had just started doing Google Decks in school and using technology. So she put together a nice presentation for a 9-year-old. And she told us all the reasons why she wanted this phone. And for us, it really wasn't about the phone. It was about the ability to communicate, the ability to handle any kind of pressure, and the ability to, take plan, task initiation, all these executive functioning skills and put it together. And we had our kids do this in different capacities. And it really set them ahead of other kids, even neurotypicals, that did not do these things. We had chores and structure that they had to do themselves. And it wasn't about, hey, it's because you're living under my roof. It was more about, when you're living on your own, you have all these responsibilities, and there's a trade-off. A job is a trade-off for money and life and things of that nature. And so we just started putting in these systems. And one of the things is, when I work with the parents versus young adults, I teach the parents how to put in these systems, because that's the structure that is needed to help their kids get from stuck to moving forward. And I know most moms, especially, I know dads are guilty of this too, but most moms especially, they have this fear that they don't want to see their children harmed or hurt in any way, which I completely understand, but their kids not picking up their room and the mom going in and doing it for them is not teaching them the ability to have responsibility and expectations and things that the world is going to put on the kids to be able to survive. And that's really what kind of got us started after my son's comments.
Rochelle, go ahead.
Yes, I'm thinking. I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned that it was genetic. For my mom, it was the same, and I kind of learned it differently. There's been a new thing on social media where they, like, I was diagnosed with ADHD, ADD, OCD, anxiety, all the things, depression, and they couldn't ever really answer the question for my mom as to why, like, the options thing. I've forever said, if I have an option between 2 or 3 things and I can't decide one, I don't want any of them. I don't care. If I can't have all of them, I don't want any of them. I can't make that decision. Same thing with the room, or even in school, it's like, I've got both of these things to do. Which one's more important? If I can't figure that out, I'm not doing either one of them. Even the socks. I was like 4 years old, and my mom would be 30 minutes late to work, fighting and screaming with me to get me to school because of the way my socks were fitting. Mm-hmm. And when you said it was genetic, a lot of what I've experienced, my mom has been able to see in herself. So is that pretty common with the parents? Is that something they can learn from, to say, hey, maybe they picked that up from me, or maybe there's a reason coming from why they do that has to do with me? Is that valid to say that the parents can kind of take a look at themselves to figure that out as well?
I would say yes. And let me first say, I'm not a doctor. So, in my family, it's genetic. I have a large family, and a lot of us are on the spectrum, and now it's become really clear, and they're admitting, and they're going and getting diagnosed. And so it's validating everything. I know environments, food, gut health, I don't know about vaccinations, but things like that have been mentioned before. I can only talk to you about the genetic side. And when my mom and I had a conversation, she says, oh, it wasn't her, but she could see it in her dad. And her dad had died prior, when I was young, so I never got to know my grandfather. But yeah, she could see the exact same things in me that were in him, and that explained a lot. So it was kind of this awareness. And I see that with many parents, is once they start exploring the path of their, especially with ADHD more than autism, once they start going down that path, they start going, oh my goodness, I have all these signs too. I just wasn't aware. And I go back to, it's because for us as parents, our life, we were never diagnosed. We grew up in a generation that said, hey, you got to do it my way or the highway, and we complied. And there was never any of these challenging situations. Whereas now, we're more open to all of this. And as my son was my mini me, everything he did, I thought was normal, because that's what I would do.
Yeah.
And so that's when the awareness started happening on that front, if that makes sense. So Rochelle, with your mom starting to see the similarities, it's probably because for her, everything she was doing was normal. Yeah. She didn't realize that it was not as normal as she thought it was, if that makes sense.
And it kicked in too. I've heard a lot of parents tell them, you're just like your uncle. You're just like your grandpa. You're just like your dad, you know? And it's a negative thing, but if we can learn from that, that's huge. And then it's got to be so challenging, because I think about kids like in foster systems. They're coming into a new house with a new space, new parents, both trying to understand each other with not a lot of background and not a lot of knowing. So it's got to be so much more important that we talk about this and make it normal, so that they can find ways to have help and understanding in that. Because I got diagnosed maybe in like 2009 or so, 2008. And half of what we're talking about right now wasn't even there in the awareness of a doctor up until maybe 5 years ago, I'd say. Maybe.
Well, even with the doctors right now, it's harder to diagnose girls than it is boys for the spectrum, because, you know, girls, you're taught to mask essentially early on, because boys, you can be wild and free and it's just a boy being a boy. But girls, you have to sit a certain way, you have to wear certain clothes, you have to act a certain way, right? And so you're taught how to mask. So when it comes time to diagnose, you've already been masking so long, it's hard for medical professionals. And usually they'll misdiagnose as bipolar or borderline personality disorder, and really it's autism. And I'll go with personal experience with my eldest daughter. When she got diagnosed, they were telling her all these things. I said, no, tell them it's autism, because she was an adult. I said, tell them it's autism. And she said, I did, but they said, because I can look you in the eye, that's not autism. And I said, oh my God, I can't believe we're still talking about looking people in the eye as the key to diagnosing. And so I think it's also making its way around medical. So even though schools are lacking, I think there's some medical professionals that are also lacking as well. And so as the training gets better, the assessments get better, because they were really built for boys. And now that it's starting to expand, I think you'll start seeing a whole lot. It's going to seem like there's more people that are on the spectrum, but it's just people that were already there, just getting acknowledged now.
Makes sense.
Good. And we all have special needs at one point or one time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think when we come back, Blake, I want to talk to you about when I was a new parent, and they said, "Oh, put the child in the crib, and if it cries, let it cry itself out." And now they have a different viewpoint of that a little bit, because some kids are really stubborn and will just cry all night. I don't know if that's been your experience or not. That was my son's. But we need to take our halftime break, and we'll be right back. Even that's a football metaphor. Can you?
It is.
So we'll be right back with Rochelle and Blake and me, and we're talking about autism. If that concerns you or anybody that you know, and that's pretty much everybody at this point, you either have it or know somebody who has it, we need to get the book and go to his website. We're going to talk about that when we come back. So stay with us, everybody. We'll be right back in a minute and 10 seconds.
You're listening to Brushwood Media Network, the best in syndicated talk, news, and entertainment shows.
Are you looking for your daily dose of inspiration? Stay connected to all your favorite shows, music, and news with the Brushwood Media Network app. From Positive Talk Radio to Greatest Vibes Unplugged and so many more uplifting voices around the world, everything you need is right in one place. It's easy to use, too. Always available and designed to keep you inspired 24 hours a day. Go to brushwoodmedianetwork.com and download the app, and you will always have Brushwood Media available on your smartphone. Download it now and make inspiration and music and conversation part of your everyday. And welcome back to Positive Talk. See, that wasn't bad. That was a minute and 10 seconds. So be quiet, everybody. My name is Kevin, and Michelle's right there. And Blake Baumann is right between us. If you're watching on TV, if you're listening to this, it doesn't matter. But Blake, I wanted to ask you, because I grew up in a household where because I'm older now, and where children were seen and not heard. And if you were heard, you ended up in your room. I spend my life in my room somehow because, but now we've hopefully taken a little bit more of a progressive attitude towards raising children. But that still thing about going to bed alone terrifies some kids, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And you mentioned right before break that you were told, let your son cry his way out. And the challenge is if it's autism, that may not work because there's different things that kids need. I was actually the opposite. I never cried. And my parents were always worried that I was dead every time they got up in the mornings because I never cried. And I didn't talk till I was about 4 because I could just point and people would do things for me and I didn't have to talk. And I'm sure they're wishing that was still the case, but hey, I learned. But with parenting these days, it is definitely, there's no real handbook. I mean, I tried my best in this book. This is mainly for teens and older and young adults for parents. But it is so difficult because every kid is so completely different. And, with the medical professionals today and their advice, there's so many different inputs. You read one thing that says, hey, pick up your crying kid and hold it. Your next article you read is, hey, don't pick up. You got to let them cry it out and understand who's right. I don't know. I don't have that answer, Kevin. There's probably somebody smarter than me that does. Rochelle is probably that person.
Yes, I am. And I want to take that even further because is it possible that through the parenting, a child can develop based off the way they were parented? They can develop it rather than be born with it?
I don't know so what I will tell you is that autism is a wiring of the brain system. And typically you have neurotypicals and you have neurodivergents. And neurotypicals, their brains are all wired very similar, but you have different personality traits. So everybody's different. Environment does impact that. For neurodivergent, your brain is typically wired differently. And so, but again, environment can impact how you do things and how you perceive things and who you become. The studies show that even when the baby's in the womb, what the mother is experiencing, the baby starts experiencing and can bring that down. There's interesting stories on epigenetics that talk about, traits that have been passed down and fears that have been passed down. And it's fascinating. I don't know that there's an answer to that, Rochelle. I really don't.
That's okay. I mean, your point is clear because maybe the way you're raised could bring some of those other things out or trigger them in other ways rather than but you're kind of it makes sense the way your brain was bonded and created in the womb with your mother. I guess it is. Everybody's different. That's fair.
Well, and it's funny because again, I'm not a medical professional. I just read a lot. And I read a study that your brain is formed with your gut in the baby when you're forming as a baby, and then it separates. And so if you look at autism, there's a lot of gut challenges that are across the board. And so the gut health is a big aspect of autism, as well as, how the brain is wired differently. So there's some connections there. But I will tell you that the environment is an incredible factor when it does come to helping our kids become successful adults, and having the right structure in the home that supports and going back to Kevin, your point of we need to be asking questions and being curious versus just assuming things. It makes a massive difference.
So, Rochelle had an interesting point, and I'd like to follow up with it because I know somebody that they had a baby. It was her first baby. It was not an easy thing for her, and she went into postpartum depression, and it was severe. And so she didn't want to pick the baby up, and she didn't want to, there were things that she was not capable for a period of time of doing, which then may have affected the development of the child and her development and bonding, which is a big deal for babies with mom. And if they can't bond, can that can affect things and lead to things, can't it?
I would say it would, because think about PTSD. PTSD and trauma rewires the brain, and so I would assume that a baby, as their brain is being developed, if they're not getting what they're needing, their brain is getting wired differently to survive, because that's essentially what we're developed to do, is to survive. I know for me, I specifically did not want to be held as a baby. And that was, and I don't know if it was a sensory thing, but my mom shares stories of that she would hold me, and it would only be for a few minutes because I wanted down and not to be held. And again, didn't cry very much. I don't know, Kevin. That's a great question.
It's, and the whole thing is that we are all so different, and I think all of us have got, and Rochelle tells me all the time that I've got some unique issues around me that may have something to do with something, and I've never been diagnosed, because in my age group, it's like, oh no, I'm not going to go get diagnosed with that. What are they going to do with me now? I'm 68 years old,
Well, I've actually had clients that were newly diagnosed in their 70s.
Really?
So you have something to shoot for, Kevin. You got something to shoot for.
Oh, brother. Rochelle, do I need to go have that checked out?
I think we should do it together so that it's very safe and not an moment. But it's beneficial though, because Blake, I want to put this into perspective in what I see it in myself, and from what I've learned is, like you said, it's not a label. It's not something that is like a problem. There's not something wrong with you. It's the way you are. It's okay. But it can be a superpower. I know I've worked with kids across the spectrum, like even fully grown adults. It doesn't matter what age. And there's things that they can do and understand and learn that the average person cannot. So if anything, it's like having a little superhuman inside of you that controls and does these different little things. But if you look at it with that perspective, can it just change the way that you live your life and feel about yourself, and the way people also view you?
Absolutely. And so my belief is that we all have this genius in us. And if we can learn to tap into the genius, because most of the kids, we're trying to fix the things that aren't working right instead of focusing on the things that are working right, and learning and leaning into their strengths and their superpowers or that genius. And if we can learn to help them unleash the genius and just manage the areas that they're not great at, they will soar farther than if we try to fix these areas. There's a reason they're not good at these areas, right? And so if we can find ways to manage those, whether with technology, AI is a big thing right now that I'm using with several clients to help them with executive functioning and social skill deficits and challenges. So there's all sorts of ways that can do that. When parents, especially, I'm going to go from the parent perspective, is when you constantly focus on the deficits, it shapes the identity of that individual. And that individual starts feeling worthless. They start feeling broken. They start feeling behind. They start feeling like they're not enough. And that leads to them getting stuck. That leads them to going down the paths of dependency and other things that we don't want them going down. If we can focus more on what they're great at and try to bring that to the surface, it's a different ball game, Rochelle.
Kevin, you've got a lot of little superpowers.
Why don't we as parents and as educators do that? Because I know in the school system, they're interested in, and maybe it's because they have no choice. but they've got large class sizes. They're interested in uniformity. They want everybody to behave a certain way at a certain time, and anything other than that is unacceptable. So it takes away the individuality of the individual and who they really are at a fundamental level, because we're looking to create little robots that do all the things the same way. And humanity isn't that way. Even if nobody was on the spectrum, we still have our differences. And why don't you? And I know your book addresses and helps parents deal with a lot of these things, but why don't we do that as a culture, as a society? Because we label people, and it's like, oh, he's on the spectrum, which sounds like awful.
I know. I'm going to use one word: fear. And especially when I coach, like I said, a lot of parents, and what I find, and this is a lot of times primarily with dads more than moms, is that the dads are really trying to get their kids to conform because they look at their kid as a direct reflection of them. And if their kid is acting a little bit different or unique or odd, it embarrasses the dad. And so they're really they try to go military or very hard discipline to try to align. And when you do that with individuals on the spectrum, you actually get the reverse effect. And because you send them into fight, flight, or freeze, that overload mode and things of that nature that really just impact them in a negative way.
Well, I know we need to take a break, but Kevin, you just hit the nail on the head, because it brings into perspective that we lose our identity through our jobs, through our homes, through our schools. Everywhere we go, we're told and viewed differently depending on who we are, and that makes us naturally pick up these different we'll put these different faces on rather than to be the same face in a different hat. So after we take this break, I really want to know, Blake, if you've able to figure out how we can maybe bond the two rather than have it be I'm a different person depending on where I go type of thing.
Yes, absolutely.
And just as an aside, on the way to the break, I'm willing to bet that virtually every stand-up comic who's been successful is on the spectrum, because they have such a unique, they have such a unique way of thinking about stuff. And we'll be right back. Not every song changes you, but the right ones do. At Greatest Vibes Unplugged, we share music that hits deeper, no filters, no noise, just pure sound with soul. This is your reminder that light still exists, and sometimes it sings. And remember, you can look up in the sky and see the stars, but still not see the light. And welcome back to Positive Talk. My name is Kevin McDonald. Rochelle's right there. Blake, I got a question to ask you.
Okay.
Do you know what song that came from? You can look up into the sky and see the stars, but still not see the light.
I'm going to have to admit, I am not a huge music fan.
Oh.
You're one
I
of
know.
those.
My wife is an 80s rock junkie, so if it was 80s rock, I should know it because I listen through osmosis, but I'd rather be in a book than listening to music.
I understand. That's an old Eagles song.
Okay.
Well,
I've
so
heard of the
your
band,
wife
if that
would know
helps.
that.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. Your wife would know that one. But anyway, Rochelle, go ahead.
Yes. And I have to say, Blake, I'm the opposite. Getting me to sit down and focus on a book, I will read 10 pages and not even know what the hell I just read. So I'll turn on music instead because I can learn a song before it's over. And that's one of those things. That's how we're different, but both can help each other. But when it comes to putting on, depending on any age of a person who is unaware of their identity being stripped from them, depending on their work, depending on their home situation, depending on their school or wherever else that they go, they put on different faces and different fronts depending on that situation. How can we help reroute that? By staying true to who we are and maybe just putting on the work hat and the school hat and the home hat, and still being who we're meant to be?
Absolutely. That's a phenomenal question. And that's actually the cornerstone of everything I coach on. Is I trademarked a coaching process called the I.D.E.A.L launch system. And I.D.E.A.L is an acronym, but I'm just going to talk about the I. The I is identity. And the identity is the core front. You can ask anybody to go do these things. And if their identity doesn't match up to those things, they're not going to be able to do them very long. And we talk about, masking is a big thing in the autism community. Everybody masks across the world, but you got to ask, why do you mask? So, Brachelle, I'm going to throw a coaching question at you real quick. When you go somewhere and you act differently, why is that?
Uncomfortability or fear.
Exactly. And so it all comes down to this root of, are we going to be loved or are we good enough? If we understand those are the two basic fears that we have, everything we do makes sense after that. So what I coach on is I coach on creating this confidence identity to be your authentic self. And so that way, when you show up, wherever you show up, you're being your authentic self and you're not giving in to the pressures around you because of fear. And I'm not saying that there's not certain protocols that when we go to the ballet versus going to a football game, right? You're probably going to have a little bit of a different behavior, but Kevin, he probably has the same behavior trying to start the wave at the ballet. I got you, Kevin. I know.
Well, you'd have to get me to go to the ballet first.
Okay. And so, but outside of that, it is all fear. It's fear. Are we going to be loved or are we enough? And if we can understand those two things, then we can start with the confidence element.
So would it be fair to say that's when people usually, where we tie in the seeking validation?
Yes.
Because there's not an identity.
We're seeking validation because we want to be loved and accepted.
Right. Okay.
And so if we come back to that core concept and we talk about that, we now understand. So I look at this, there's, I think, 8 billion people on the planet. And so I kind of look at when we're our authentic self, we're going to attract in the people that are going to be our tribe, and we're going to repel the people that won't be our tribe. And that's a great thing. When we're not our authentic self, especially with the autism side, we're going to be trying to put on this mask. And what happens is that starts draining us. It's like a cell phone battery that gets down to deplete. Well, what happens when a cell phone battery depletes?
You need to charge it.
Well, you need to charge it or it turns off, right?
It turns off.
Dies. And so for neurotypicals, the best way I can describe this is it's almost like the hangry feeling, that hungry and angry, when all of a sudden you start getting mean and nasty for no reason. That's what happens when we deplete our battery completely off, and we got to escape. We say things because we go into self-protection mode. And that's where it's only on ourselves, and we're trying to escape the situation. We're trying to manage as much as we can with the least amount of energy. And it really just makes a big difference if we don't get down to that depleted stage by being confident in who we truly are.
Okay, Kevin, I want to let you finish up, but I just have to say this, and Blake, you just can give me a yes or no. But don't you agree that if we were to work on the identity of who we were, especially with our neurodivergence and autistics and a little bit of our specialness of us, that it would help us not ever really get to the point and lower the numbers of depression and suicide and substance abuse?
Yes.
Okay.
I absolutely
just
agree.
Want everybody to hear that.
Yeah. Yep.
Say that again, Brachelle. That was very powerful.
Yes, if we can, oh my gosh, if we can focus on who we really are and finding our identity within ourselves rather than seeking it and not running out of that battery, it will help us drop globally in numbers of substance abuse, suicide, and depression, which is massive.
Yes.
I'd like to add one more thing. I think that because I don't think this is taught in leadership school in any form for business leadership. Because the key to a good leader is to be able to find what the individual that is standing in front of you can do well, and then promote that person in the job that they're doing to be able to do that really well. instead of saying, you can't do what everybody else can do, so we're gonna, like, get rid of you, because that doesn't solve anything. But because some of these people, and well, all of these people have got skills, if applied correctly, can do amazing things, and they can be very good for the business. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was going to give you a quick story. At the last company before I started my coaching business, I came in from an operations side, and I did exactly that. Is I had everybody do several assessments like strength finders. I had some custom assessments where they did, and we looked at all their talents. And then what we did is we rearranged them and moved their jobs. And sometimes we created a job for them so that they could enhance their talents. And it turned this company's numbers inside out. I mean, retention of clients went up, sales went up, and overall happiness. It was one of the best places to work in Ohio. And so it's just amazing when you tap into that and you're open-minded to do that, you can transform your entire company.
And I keep telling people that the one aspect of running a company that is overlooked is turnover. Turnover is expensive, and training somebody to do the job that somebody else was already doing, it doesn't make any sense to me. So find out what they do well and promote them to be the best person that they can be, and putting it all together. And I think if more businesses did that, they could raise productivity, lower turnover, and magically more falls to the bottom line.
One quick addition to that, Kevin, is that many people on the spectrum, when they go to work somewhere, they're not looking for jobs anywhere else. They're looking for a home. They want to feel safe. They want to feel certain. And so if you understand that, they'll be with you for a very long time, and they'll be your best employees because they're not there to small talk. And they're not there to do the water cooler thing. They're there to get their job done and do it at a high level. And so if you can tap into that population, it will transform, the economics of your company.
And this starts back in schools and with parents, right? Because if we can find out what our kids' strengths are, we may not turn them into all these, like for me, I didn't know what I was good at, or I figured out what I was not good at after having 40 jobs and not being able to stay in one place for 3 to 6 months or less than that. And I think that's helpful, because then we don't have people coming into a business where we're trying to figure them out and they're trying to figure it out, and it's just not a good fit, rather than figuring that out beforehand. So when they do go out there and they do get their job, they feel like they are in a space where they're comfortable and they belong, because it's already a built-in strength. So,
absolutely. So that you get your kids doing the traditional like ASVAB and career assessments and so forth. And so what I do whenever I work with a young adult or a teen is we take in their sensories, we take in their passions, we take in their intrinsic motivators, their rules, all of this proprietary stuff, and we cross it over, and usually it spits out 3 or 4 directions that if this young person goes, not only they're going to be really good, but they're going to be really happy. And that's where they don't have to mask. They have the longer battery life, and they're using and tapping into their strengths. And it just makes it a whole lot better for everybody.
I agree.
Blake, I've been doing this a while now, and I've had a bunch of co-hosts over the years, and she's the best one by far I've ever. I don't care if you're on the spectrum. You're perfect.
Thanks, Kevin. You too.
She's incredible, Kevin. You did well. You did well with the co-host.
I'm using my superpowers, and that's how I found you. I'm where I'm supposed to be.
That's exactly right. By the way, we've been talking with Blake Baumann, and get his book, which is called Autism Launch Plan. And it's a parent's guide to helping your children and your teen and your young adult successfully launch into life and get away from the video games and the feeling that they can't do anything, because they can. They just have to be given the opportunity to find out what that is.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. And parents, there's a ton of information in there that will walk you through putting together a key structure that is needed. I call it the X factor that's needed to help them launch into life and help you change how you communicate with your kids so that you have an incredible relationship with them as well.
Yep. And I'm just struck here that by by telling your kids that they can't do something or they're not very good at that, that's counterproductive for them, isn't it? Shouldn't you be tailoring it towards what they're doing right and doing well and catching them doing something right?
Well, common sense would tell you yes, but when we're trying to help our kids get to where they're wanting to go and there's a deficit, we typically go and gravitate towards that deficit. And we're not intentionally trying to tell our kids they're not doing a good job, or they're not enough. But the signs that we're doing is sending that message to the kids. And so that's the key element. Is we have to watch the words we use. We have to talk to them a little bit differently. We can't just put demands on them, because it triggers their sensories, especially their fight, flight, or freeze. And if they get into that mode, they're going to shut down, they're going to melt down, they're going to run away, and you won't make any progress whatsoever. And so, yeah, it's really
important. Like, they're kids. They're learning. They don't even we had talked to people all the time, me and Kevin, and people come on here and they're like, at 50, I didn't even know any of this. And, we need to stop putting each other on a timeline of learning and pay attention to, if a child is a child, anybody under the age of really 30 is still kind of a child in a way and is learning. And if we're not patient with them, they won't be able to be patient with themselves. But we are running out of time. I hate when this happens. Blake, I would love to have you back on the show and also hear about how that football game went for your son. But if he can join us back in next time, that'd be awesome. And I wanted to share for everybody, Blake is working on his website. If you hear this, it'll probably already be up by then, unless you're watching it live. Watch for that. It's going to be Baumann.com, and that is BAWMANN if you're just listening to this. But Blake, I want to give you the last word. Yeah.
I need to make a correction. So it's BLAKEBAU, not W. So BAUMANN.
You know what I said, but thank you for correcting.
Absolutely. No worries. But I want every parent to know that it's possible for their kids, whether a medical professional, somebody else in life has told them that their kids aren't able to succeed. That's just not true. It is possible. And it starts with having the belief and the hope that they can do it. And if you believe in your kid, you will be their best advocate, and you're the key to their success. So don't lose the hope, keep the belief, and you'll make a tremendous difference in your child's life.
And if I could just add this to any parent everywhere, and it doesn't matter, it's how you talk to your children. Do not call anybody dumb or stupid, because that's counterproductive, and then they start to believe that. And nobody's dumb or stupid. We all have gifts, and we all can do great things. Don't you think, Blake?
Absolutely. There's the old Thomas Edison story where he got sent home from school, and he had a note, and basically he handed it to his mom, and his mom read it and said, "Hey, your son is too smart to be home to be schooled. You're going to have to find somebody at home to educate him." And I'm making the story quick, but so Thomas Edison became Thomas Edison. Well, after his mom died, he went and actually was going through her things, and he found the note, and the note said, "Actually, your son is too dumb." I'm kind of paraphrasing, too dumb, and we don't think he'll do well in school, so you need to keep him home and homeschool. And just think, if mom would have read those exact words versus the other words that she put and spoke faith on them and inspiration, who knows how technology and our devices that he's created, light bulbs, things of that nature, would all be today.
If you as a parent cannot inspire your children, nobody else is going to be able to. So thank you, Blake. And Rochelle said it best. You're going to have to come back. We ain't done with you yet.
Sounds good.
And thank you, Rochelle. You were awesome today, as always. Thank you for being part of Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald, where stories inspire and voices remind us of what truly matters. May today's conversation give you hope, courage, and a reason to keep moving forward. And just remember, till next time, be kind to one another, because each other's all we've got.